Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 3rd of December 2024, and it is a minute to midnight. We have a few subject matters to kind of touch on this evening. I've labeled this part one. I will do maybe a 3 or 4 part series because of the nature of the time that we are in. And as always, throw some perspective, and some ideas over to you guys to at least put on the table for your own benefit, so that you can at least position yourself accordingly, put some active measures in play, because not is all as it seems at the moment when it is in relation to the big dance that we call the last part of the first part of the changeover years heading into 2025, which was always going to be a defining choice point for all of us individually, locally, you can say nationally, but also from a planetary perspective upon which way that we actually choose to action, and where that place comes from. We are all running around with programs, beliefs, and perceptions more often than not. That is not the easiest conversation to have, but are you working the technology, or is the technology working you? Yeah, and in that algorithm getting you to be in a reactionary or adversarial state, are you able to see from a centered point of view, or is it a continued looping of programs, beliefs, and perceptions, and anybody that does not align with that bandwidth that you see things, that you would cast as the enemy? Such is the heightening of the times. I am going to start off with a bit of a preface, and I'm not going to be mincing my words anymore. I don't think I do anyway, but more from a direct manner. And for those that only speak emotionalese or emotionalism, or what I am now determining as bitchcraft, I am not your guy. Use your thumb, give it a flick, because my days of actually compensating to have conversations with that type of stuff, that's just not where I am at or where I am going. A little bit tired of it, to be quite honest, but I will be doing some conversational pieces in relation to some of the defensive nature that one needs to take when it comes to bitchcraft and its language formation, that we're going to speak upon how that has seeped through, we can say, almost from the work that we've seen from the last 4 years. But that really had its onset in 1989, where political correctness came to the forefront. And then I believe it was in 95 or 96 where emotional intelligence really became a very big push, particularly when it came to academia and skewing psychology and even psychotherapy to be going down one train of thought and discussion and language point of view. Anything else or outside of that would then be determined as toxic, or all the rest of the other buzzwords that are no longer hidden, to see that there is a massive agenda to play. We could very easily say it was a divide and conquer, but it gets very difficult when you and I would be speaking with the same language of English that we understand, but if there is a skewing of the actual words and their defined meaning, well, that's where folks like you and I are unable to communicate. And depending what frame one is coming from with that, it is going to skew it a lot, particularly when it comes to EQ, because you could use a word and someone will go, oh, I don't like the way that you are using that word. It hurts me. Why don't you use this word? Because of a feelings component, where words aren't feelings. Words actually have meanings behind it. And are we able to, over the next period of time, get clear in the language that we are actually using externally, but also from an internal nature as well, because there's a massive skewing that has taken place in relation to that. But moving on, let's just get straight into it, yeah? The first topic of discussion is frontside actions and active measures. I could do a whole show on this. There's been a few people that have asked me over the past few months to detail it. I think I do a pretty decent job in Portal. I'm not sure if I really want to do that. There's enough quality folks out there that have extreme subject matter expertise, and some of those have some type of involvement with that. But there's one that has taken place in the last 24 hours that should be used as a marker of sorts. And there's a couple of other components to it. And if you've been reading the tea leaves for a while, this is this active measures point of view. And the first way I'm going to explain it is because I understand a lot of folks have this idea of wanting justice, and justice in a term that's being presented to us through Hollywood TV, or even what we would term of justice of going to court. But there is no justice in a justice system, is there? And unfortunately, well, I say fortunately, but there's deals being made. There has been for a long period of time, and all the rest of these components. So let's start off with the first one. We all know that Joe Biden, whatever that is at the moment, has just essentially exonerated Hunter Biden. I see that as great, because then it gives Hunter Biden the opportunity to speak or be leveraged to speak in certain committees and other hearings without being prosecuted or tainted, particularly when it comes to, let's say, the Ukraine, for instance, and what was actually going on there, and some of the other, let's say, political families that were running a scam. And that goes a long way back to the coup that actually took place in the 2010s. I won't get into detail with that. There's enough out there. If you don't know about that, I would definitely go and have a look. And there is some more historical elements to that. But the other one is the COVID investigation that has taken 2 years to bring forward into officialdom a lot of the silent truths that have broken through. And one would almost go, why has it taken so long? Well, you have to get into a timing element of things. And not just me, there are many others that have, I think we've done a decent job, but it doesn't seem to want to be soaking in. But you've been a part of a massive, massive deprogramming operation for the last 4 years. You have, as much as you would look at the material, and there's been a whole range of different dramas and shit shows and we'd almost say Hollywood theatrics play out. But if you move all of that to the side, life has kind of been on a pause, hasn't it? Just ticking over. Yet there's some economy things going on, which we're going to explain about. But what has this 4 years really been all about? Well, there's been specific operations taking place, particularly across social media, more so now on Twitter than on Facebook, almost like a content mapping exercise to be able to see which groups form what content and what so-called truths or information is able to be pushed out, and then what other conversations piggyback off that. And then even inserts, and it gets rather complicated dealing with military grade psychological warfare, seriously. And it's all good and well to sit there and use those words and think you know what you're talking about. But if you want to go deeper into it, I suggest you go and spend some time in relation to game theory also fifth generational warfare, but also psychic driving. I've mentioned that word a lot, which is a precursor to MK Ultra, which has a civilian purpose, also a military purpose, but also a covert purpose. But the psychic driving components, if you were to go into that and really see how that was developed and the mechanisms of it, you would come to the conclusion, if you want to be really honest and deal with reality as it is that you've been infected by that, particularly with a remapping of language and with words. Can almost throw in a lot of NLP in relation to that. That's why there seems to be a lot of folks have cottoned on to predictive programming, whether that be The Simpsons, all the rest of these components. That's great. It's pushing the bar forward. A lot more people come to conclusions. But if you're not actually understanding the mechanisms or the allegorical or the symbology that is actually being used to program certain elements of your subconscious, and you picking up phrases in movies or even in cartoons and then regurgitating that, is a reason why Simpsons was on rerun all the time. It's a reason why MASH was on reruns all the time. There's a reason why all of these reruns were on all the time, because of certain phrases, techniques, and even changes in the perversion of how we actually use our tongue when we speak. But let's just step back a moment. So with this COVID investigation, the Hunter side of things, you could see where this is essentially going. It is going to create conversations, particularly across the Five Eyes nations. I'm interested to see how it develops here in Australia, since we took all of our cues from the US. And what actually takes place there. I know a lot of folks in the, let's say, truther community want heads, but this isn't the time for heads. This is the time really to just stop for a moment and watch to see how this actually rolls itself out. And what I mean by that is what conversations actually get tabled, who actually has some humble pie, and potentially who are the leaders that get presented to us to be able to run certain committees in relation to development. Because where this leads, Ukraine is connected with this, and I'm going to get into it. Let's think of this as with financial games, okay? A lot of this COVID stuff, even in 2016, the financial element is the key to all of this, all of it really, in relation to the changeover. Who is going to be in control of that system? I know a lot of truthers aren't going to like hearing this, but we are going to have some type of form of digital ID. It is where the tech is going. It is where we are as a civilization at the speed that we do things. There's going to be elements of that. Which way that goes, I'm more leaning towards there's more of a benevolent force that is managing certain elements of that. And let's say the malevolent force is essentially at the table, still trying to do their games. Hence why the past 4 years. But I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, because it's coming up quite a lot with some of Donald Trump's selections. So one of the selections for Treasury Secretary is Scott Bensent. A lot of people are jumping up and down about that. Oh, he's a bar cat, blah, 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 blah. Stop for a moment and think. We're at a stage in the game where people are at the table doing negotiations and a whole range of different stuff. There's so many different layers to this, and it is a lot more than just the usual suspects in Roth, Rock, Soros. You know, you're talking about dynasty families that a lot of people don't know the names of. It's at that level, beyond nation state. But Scott Bensent was one of Soros' right-hand man. What does that mean, Grant? Well, George Soros from, I believe it was 91 or 92, has been able to, with his NGOs, get all the way down to the local level. Has he not? How has he been able to do that within the financial industry? What mechanisms, what operations, what logistics, what assets have been deployed into certain avenues, all the way down to the local level, into academia, and even into, particularly in the US, into their judiciary system to enforce a lot of this crazy woke stuff. If you were going to, okay, this is game theory, okay? If you're going bad guy hat, yeah, if you're going to live to fight another day, wouldn't you give one of your key assets up? Or would, if you've taken control of it, wouldn't you want to hub somebody in that position that there has essentially been a parasite within inside certain social systems that has been able to essentially usurp the culture of a nation, and not just one nation, almost the whole of the Western world? Interesting, that, isn't it? What's not spoken about a lot is Soros. Depending upon who you speak to, he was once upon a time Pindar. There's also another upon a time Phoenix, all the rest of those components. If you're interested, Jesse Ayani, Jesse Ayani, Jesse Sabota speaks about that. And the reason why I bring that up, particularly when it comes to here in Australia, something else is very interesting that's just taken place too. Now, I have to refer myself back to, this is before 2020, really. Absolute legend of a fella, seriously connected individual. When we're having a conversation, was speaking to me about, on the other side of all of this, is that Australia will be a part of, at that time he said, name might change, but it'd be a United States Federation. Australia would be classified almost as a territory. Somehow New Zealand would be a part of that. All of the islands like Cook Island and all the rest of those components would be a part of the protectorate, all that territory. And that Canada would essentially become a part of a North American Union. Whether Mexico is a part of that, it wasn't part of that discussion, mainly to do with Five Eyes. My question, I wouldn't say question, they had a good yarn about it, but it also comes to the point of within Europe, you'd have a look at Europe, and Europe would essentially more than likely return to pre-World War I borders. So Hungary extending itself back into its empire, which is a part of that is Ukraine, isn't it? And the other half of Ukraine is essentially Russian territory. So does does the western part of Ukraine become a protectorate of Hungary as it assimilates and goes through a massive healing? It's looking that way, isn't it? But you've just had Trudeau and Trump have a meeting at Mar-a-Lago, and it was reported on Fox News, and it's going around a little bit. And Trudeau turned around to Trump and said, well, if you put these tariffs on, the Canadian economy would essentially implode. And Trump jokingly said, well, if that is the case, maybe Canada should be the 51st state. And this is what I mean, folks, with a lot of these active measures. There's a lot of things being thrown out, and if I wouldn't say not paying attention, but it is all headed towards a big moment, and that big moment is the financial game. Is there going to be a theatre of war that it can be blamed on? Is there some other type of event? Is there something around that? If I was a betting man, it has to be that, the way that the theatre has really been playing itself out. And I want to step back a little bit, because I've mentioned this a few times to some individuals over the last few years, and obviously Kobe got a lot of people alert. Fantastic, pushing the bar forward. But I believe it was in 2014, 2015, even in 2013, there was a lot of bankers that were jumping off the top of buildings. There was a lot of bankers that were dying. Interesting, that. And there was a song that came out with Taylor Swift and Kendrick Lamar at that time. Go and watch that film clip, because what you will see is being presented is this control of who has the suitcase for what would be regarded as some of these backside systems when it comes to the financial elements. Interesting. And then between 2016 and 2020, you had a whole heap of CEOs resign. What was that all about? Well, there's still a lot of that happening, but this is what I mean, is that you've got a massive multi-layered, multifaceted game going on, where who is actually going to have the authority or be in position to press the button as we go through a transition. And it is going to be extremely bumpy. What I know and understand, and it's been spoken out there, is that there has been a lot of deals being cut with certain organizations that were once set up through alphabet agencies that have been able to be turned in, essentially, that were going to be used for one thing, that are now in a position to go through this transition. And one of those there is Frontside, is Elon Musk. You could almost say there's still a bit of a battle going on with Google. Looks like Meta has gone through its metamorphosis. So I'm bringing this up because if you're paying attention, there is massive opportunities, because it is not going to be the same old shit show. Do we end up moving into an open source type of environment? I believe so, but it's not going to be an announcement. It is going to come up to you and I as mavericks pushing the bar in a particular region. Hence why there is a need for this type of digital ID moving into a new frontier of technology. Now, I've seen some stuff, not some of the exotic stuff, but let's say from a computing perspective, to give you a perspective, it would be like taking your brand new S24 Samsung back to 2006. That's how quick technology will be moving in a very short space of time. Yeah, I have noticed that, Kerry. Same as a lot of my bans on both Instagram and Facebook have been lifted finally, and one of my strikes from YouTube has been is no longer there. So this is what I mean. There's a lot of really, really big stuff going on under the surface. And this gets into my next point. Yeah, that's what I mean. I could keep going on, but I suppose I'm throwing those ones out at you as not all is as it seems. And there seems to be a massive negotiation really going on at the moment. And it does affect you and I at a ground zero level, because if you can see it before it happens, so to speak, or it's moving in that direction, well, you're going to be able to position and move into a new domain of knowing a lot quicker without needing to continue the programs, beliefs, and perceptions upon how the world used to work and how you thought you needed it to run. Can you let go of that and learn a new craft? And that's what a massive part of this deprogramming phase is about. and why things will be coming out in certain ways. And as much as people want to yell and scream and blah, 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 well, and get into that shortly, because there's a lot of this, yeah, but people don't have any subject matter expertise. They haven't spoken to anybody that has at least been in those types of environments before. And it's just a yelling and screaming upon, I need it to look and be a particular way. And if it does not, then it must mean this, without looking at a whole range of different data sets and perceptions. And one part as well, understanding good strategy and game theory, understanding really the game that you're in, because it looks like one thing can be another. It's been a big 10 years. The next topic of discussion is priorities in this next phase. I'm not going to answer that one for you, but that's a question for you to actually write down and consider. Because if it is still going to be the adversary, so to speak, that drives you to action, which is what this computer type of information age has essentially done, you're going to get caught playing someone else's game. But if your priorities are more to do with the sustenance of this here, your temple, whatever that is for you, you're going to be in a much better position to make decisions on the run without getting caught up in the arguing, yelling, and screaming and all the rest of those components. Here we are, last month for the first part of the changeover years, 2020 to 2024. 2025 is the choice point. Yeah. And I mean, every single choice you make and action from is a much bigger game. It is huge. There is a massive spiritual component in relation to this as well. And I could almost go as far as the reality dynamics aren't just changing, they have changed. The idea of faking it till you make it, or the old school manifestation trick of just dreaming it into existence, well, look how much of a delusional mind state that has created, that people have ignored reality. Yeah. This is this Waconian, and even in the spiritual side of things, is that the reality needs to fit the illusion. And if it doesn't, then that's someone else's projection, or it's wildness. We're not in that game. The cause and effect has essentially leveled itself out. So what are you in a resonant tone of, and can call into an accordance in an octave of truth? Yeah, octave of truth. That's essentially the choice that we've made in the last couple of years. So the lies that you tell yourself, there's consequences to that, because they're the choices that you are choosing to action. They're not in accordance with reality, are they? So priorities in the next phase of time. Choose wisely, legends. The next one here, I had to tone it back just a little bit, and I may do an hour or two episode on this because I think it's important, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the psychological components of the perception games and the splitting of worlds. Wow, programs, beliefs, and perceptions rule the day, don't they? And we can't take ourselves too seriously. But once again, we've been in an environment for a long time now where sound right truths and feel right truths rule the day. And it creates a distortion, almost an illusionary type of component, because language gets warped once again and things need to look and be a particular way. And if they are not, then let's bring out the psychological dribble of emotionalism and weaponizing words to coercive control or emotionally manipulate to get someone to do what we want them to do. And that there has created such a friction across the social order. Just even have a look at it at the moment. Like, depending upon how you're actually seeing things, if you're black pill, it's we don't have any hope. It's this, it's a simulate. It's crazy, yeah. And then the moment that one would ask them to qualify their quantum, whoa, look at the reaction one would get. And it's like interesting. And I suppose you have some more red pill individuals or even purple pill or whatever pill sticking ecstasy tablets up your backside. Have more fun doing that, wouldn't you? Where it's essentially a perception game. Now, where did those perceptions come from? Are they your perceptions? Are they your beliefs? Or is it acceptable at an intellectual level or an emotional level without digging any further or asking any relevant questions, let's say, to have a different perception or move into a different degree of separation to see something a little bit differently, or even listen to folks that have subject matter expertise? Because in this perception game, particularly from COVID, it's funny because it's been, and rightly so, we've ignored anybody from academia. Okay, there's a lot of bullshit that's happened there. That's what I mean. I've explained that from the invent of PC culture and the emotional intelligence that's really gone into academia has skewed language. It's pretty bad. If you want to have a laugh, just go and have a look at whatever, go watch, a few different episodes of whatever podcast. And I suppose the titty community have a crack at me, but you're seeing the change in language and what that has actually done. And feel good truths need to be accommodated to fit the illusion and reject reality. It's fucking wild. But where I'm getting to is that someone can go, I have researched this subject, listen to me, and speak a whole heap on it. And I'm like, okay, cool, credits. But it's like, where did you research that from? What actually is the source material? And which angle are you actually coming at it from? Was it from a knowledge-based perspective, wanting to know more information to come to a conclusion? Or have you already got a conclusion and you're looking at the information to fit that conclusion? And there seems to be more of the latter that has taken place. And then it comes to a point where someone has some subject matter expertise to be able to build out or have a deeper conversation upon certain subjects. That's no longer, we're not going to have that conversation. We're going to use more bitchcraft because I've positioned myself as an authority, as a researcher behind the computer that doesn't have any real world example of it. And the conversations I have are there to verify where my research has come from. But at the very same time, too, yell and scream about psyops and everything else like that. How do you know the information that you weren't researching actually come from a program that was there to move content and the conversation into another direction? You don't know that, do you? So this is this funny game that we're kind of in really at the moment. And this is difficult to say, but it's why you can notice out there a lot of talking heads are essentially in a loop free fall at the moment, because it's the chemtrails, it's the flutter, it's all of these things. But on a list of priorities, are they really a priority for your life right now in a very real world sense? upon seeing really what is taking place, positioning, and what game you're actually wanting to play? Or has it become the new Netflix to yell and scream on all the rest of these components? And I can argue that to the cows come home, but from a psychological perspective and actually analyzing that, there's truth in it. The motto has been speak truth, create a brand, and then it becomes about creating content. The algorithms and everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but the main thing is this confrontational, this adversarial nature upon the content creation, and anybody that speaks against it, therefore seen as a threat and will attack. And it's the same type of language that is being used. Where has that language actually come from? Well, it's come from the psychic driving that we've all been infected with since the mid 90s, the intensification of it in the 2000s, and the weaponization of that military grade fifth generational warfare has been in the 2010s. We're all infected with it. And this gets into the next component with the Psy-Fallout begins to hit the spiritual and truther communities. You see it everywhere. Yeah, we can kind of see it within ourselves. What are we essentially arguing with when we're going to be at a point very shortly? We're all going to get to compare some notes. Isn't that going to be fantastic? What you're yelling and screaming about, is it the hill that you want to die on? Interesting. And what type of game are you playing, knowing that there's a new game in town? Because it's fascinating about that, because reality hits hard, yeah? And the pseudo loves more illusions to pick itself up. It's a fucking wild world, because there's more going on than the so-called they and the agenda. The bigger component here is you and your choices and how one is actually going about it. Not anybody else, you, okay, and me. Not on recruiting drives or anything like that. What actually is important, and coming back to the question that I put to you, is your priorities in the next phase. What essentially are they? You know, wouldn't it be nice to have a little bit of a reset and go through a re-individuation process again as a more mature and wise adult? Fantastic. Or do you want to sit there and yell and scream, they took our jobs, or they're going to do this, or I told you this? So you didn't say anything. The only thing you're doing is repeating what people have told you that align to the way that your perceptions actually are. Have you had a conversation with some other people, or listened to sometimes a 3-hour podcast where there's only 5 minutes of absolute gold? Don't want to do that. That's okay. And where I want to get to with the psychological fallout begins to hit the spiritual and truther community is and Cliff High, I believe, has done an amazing job over the past couple of years. And the language he's using at the moment is the ontology, rightly so. You know, I know a lot of people don't like old Cliff, but fucking super smart man, very well researched, and deserves to be listened to. Is redefining what our words are again, because they've been co-opted and used. And within, let's say, the spiritual community, which is a funny one, because it's I've just channeled this, therefore everybody needs to believe me. And because I've said this on this subject and it's come from somewhere else, if you say anything else like that, that there is your trauma, or that's your mummy wound, that's your daddy wound, or you need to do more shadow work and inner child work. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh, you're really, you know me, do you? Oh, yes, you're a this, and I'm a human design this, so that means I'm this, this, and this, and this. You're a fucking raving lunatic that hasn't put two things together in the past 10 years, where you sit there and you think that you have some type of privilege to regurgitate opinions that you think are factual, and anybody that says anything towards that, you want to use psychobabble language, throw in some Carl Jung and some other nonsense to scoot around that. I wish you well over the next period of time as reality gives you a Van Damme roundhouse to your fucking third eye. It's going to be wild. And I say this to you guys here that listen to me. Do not tolerate that type of nonsense anymore. Wish them well. Are you going to see reality as it is, or keep wanting to whip up your own illusions? Yeah, I have a lot to say on that subject. A lot. A fucking lot. But I'll leave it there for this evening. Maybe on Sunday night we can go a little bit deeper and we can have a little bit of a yarn, because I'll get into some of the actual communication dynamics upon how the script is actually run, and the bitchcraft is essentially used as a recruiting strategy. And even though some folks aren't narcissists, but they've adopted narcissistic language to hide behind something that actually isn't real and present a pseudo creation, a fictional character that's created out of the isness, so to speak, for someone just to say some stuff like, oh, what was one that I read the other day? What was it? It was by an Ahab fella. You don't know who Ahab is, just pick up the Bible and read about Jezebel and Ahab. What was it? That if you're a man and you experience loneliness, that must mean that what was it? You were abandoned as a child. Fucking really? You want to take out dental insurance if you went to the family court and said that to a dude that just had his whole life fucking turned upside down, wouldn't you? But once again, this is this language, these things that are feel good truths that have been adopted. But if you actually ask them to qualify what the fuck they're talking about, they don't know the words they speak. It sounds good. Yeah. Can they get into the deeper things? Or it's a this, it's a that. It's really, can you actually see things as they are, or you want to get into some type of psychotherapy language that you know nothing about, you have no experience about, but you want to sit there and utilize all of these words, and then it turns into an emotionalism type of conversation very quickly the moment that they get caught out or they get asked a question. Oh, you're this, you must be this. It's not. I'm a kind guy. I'll kindly watch you make an ass of yourself, but if you want to keep going, I'll kindly teach you a fucking lesson. And I'm eager at the moment. I've been a bit quiet for a while because I've been doing my homework. But let's carry on, shall we? Which game are you playing? And I think that's a good segue to kind of wrap this one up this evening, doesn't it? Because we just had a little bit of a fire in the belly. And I know all of you listening here that are watching are probably having a good laugh, because it's like, it's absolute nonsense. How many times you've been in a conversation with someone and they just go blah, and you're like, and you go to say something, and then the psychobabble comes out as a defense mechanism, and it's like, we're not even speaking the same language here, but then they want you to change your tone to fit into their delusion. Fuck off. So which game are you playing? Can you find your center? Know the uniqueness and the words that you actually speak. Silence is a virtue. Pick your lane, your trajectory with your intent. See the world actually as it is presenting. Ask better quality questions, because it's not the answer, it's the quality of your questions that will reveal things to you. Now we can sit there and do some hamada and call in the 450 dimensional whatever the fucks to give some perspective. That's fucking great. But how's about just sit for a moment, yeah? And just find your own rhythm, find your own speed, understand your own cycles, yeah? Come back to the natural world. And one that I would suggest, and even though I've been on a bit of a tangent this evening, but I think it's great that a lot of people are into astrology. What I don't think is any beneficial that people think because they know your birth date and the positions of your planets that they actually know you more than you know yourself. Okay, I wish you well with that one. Or your human design this, so that means that you're this, even though your life experiences just don't exist anymore, do they? Okay, but watch the heavens. Okay, and I mean this. I have respect for folks that get into something that is their, they find passion, there's something there, but don't come to me or speak to me about astrology if I was to take you out at night and you can't even fucking name a star from a planet. Go and study them. Get into the cycle. If you are into that, build a relationship with that. Understand the mythological stories. Come back to your myth. There is a much bigger game, and it is ancient, and it is part of your story here in this skin suit technology. You have to remember, not 100 years ago, you would have to navigate by the stars. You still need to do that in some parts of this world. We've disconnected ourselves from that to a map. Yeah. I am not an expert, but I'm in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, and I know I need to spend some time with Pegasus and Cassiopeia and Andromeda and Draco and seeing Orion turned on its side. I'm fascinated. It's a whole new sky for me. And I suppose for myself personally, it gives me the opportunity to go back to being a beginner again with the knowledge and wisdom that I had with being in the Southern Hemisphere. Fucking awesome. But what are you using those tools actually for? Is it for soft power, or actually is it for innate power for you to know the cycles, watch the planets, understand those things, come more into a rhythm with the biosphere? Like even go and take some mushies and light a small fire and watch Orion do his moonwalk across the sky as he tries to cha the Pleiades every single fucking night, and she just denies him access every single time. Pull out a book and read about the mythological story of Andromeda that's buried in Greek mythology. Yeah. Artemis, like all of these things, it is there for you to go and taste the nectar of the wisdom of our ancient past. And it's in here. It will open you up to here. Rather than these fantastical new hero journey stories that are a figment of our imagination that we pour language and digital identities in, that we don't even know the words that we speak. And don't get me started with the whole authority and initiation game at the moment, which is just a whole other marketing thing, but that's my wrap on that. And lastly, who are we without the adversary? You could almost call me a little bit of a hypocrite with what I've done over the last 15 minutes with having a crack, but I'm telling it as it is, how it is seen. And if someone was to qualify me, we could actually have a much deeper conversation and actually build those types of language bases and communications out. There's a lot of folks on the internet that have done that. For the fellas, there's a book that I highly recommend that you go and read. And even for the sisters, it's a Rational Male book, and it's his fourth one called Religion. There's only one problem, Mr. Rollo Tomasi. I know it took you 3 years to write that book, but that would have been handy if that was written in like 2015 when I was going through some absolute nonsense. Be a difficult read for some because it's going to punch you in your own programming, but you're going to see of how not just religions are formed, but how we create our own religions through craziness. And what I mean by who are we without the adversary? Because if you were to just do this as a little bit of an audit, when you're scrolling through Facebook, see how much of the actual content you're viewing has come from something and there's a reaction to it. I hardly see any poetry anymore that's inspired by beauty. I don't see anything really creative that's coming from a place of wisdom and knowledge to impart. Just because it doesn't get the likes, no one really shows it. You can go through my feed and see over the last month or so, my engagement's certainly a lot down with trying to do those things. But the moment that I would be a little bit of a smart ass, and throwing an adversary in there, the algorithm likes it. But that's also a language that we've adopted with this very binary checkerboard game without really understanding the shade of grey that we actually stand on or can maneuver with and see things actually as they are. Okay, it's all an invitation. Do I choose to want to play it or not? Because if we're still making actions from a reactionary basis caused by someone else, are we actually really creating, or are we once again moving into programs, beliefs, and perceptions? It's a funny world. And I suppose this is one of these choice points that we've got over the period of time, because without they or them, who are we? I think it's a bit scary then, doesn't it? Because then it comes down to, well, you actually have the authority with the words that you speak externally, the words you use here, the words you use in your body with your own action, and understanding the full totality and the authority that you have within that, and freedom to execute within those choices. Oh yeah, but what about them? Well, we've given authority over to them, and we're in a time here of changeover. What is the choice point that you are going to make over the next period of time? Don't worry about them. That's their game. Yeah. It's a big game, folks. Be very selective upon what you allow into your game. And if it is from an entertainment factor of doom scrolling or whatnot, well, I'm happy to have a Q&A with you guys. But what myth are you living? What is your myth? What stories actually inspire you from the ancient past that are in a place of a regenesis, of coming forward again, where the mystery is presenting itself, rather than, we could almost say, the false gods or the false hero's journey, or the illusionary components where it's, here's your 17 steps or your 24 steps or your 450 steps of your own hero's journey. Well, okay, well, what about all the other mythoses that are out there that I can pull something from that and understand that from a very big mythological and archetypal level, that's actually the choices that we get to make from a much bigger monadic component. And a lot of what folks would deem as demons is essentially a choice to play out archetypal games. Hence why I mentioned the Jezebel and Ahab story, because that is running rampant across our society, that is calling in, we could say, bigger archetypal sigil demonics, being Baal and Asherah. If you don't understand about that, go have a look at it and you'd go, holy shit, Asherah has run rampant through the Western world. And Ahab, well, has just essentially given permission because he speaks womanese or emotionalism. There's a lot to learn from those stories, particularly, I'm not going to say particularly, but Greek mythology. I know a lot of you folks are probably a bit more adept with Carl Jung, but you understand that most of the great Western minds have been watered by the seeds of ancient Greece. Plato's Republic. Like, you need to read that like 5 times before you actually have the intellectual capacity to fucking understand how layered that is. I don't see anybody talking about that at the moment. Read it once. Oh yeah, it was great. It's a masterpiece. You know, and I'm just going to leave you with this, because it's where you can say dude love comes from. Yeah, is that I've made mention of this a few times. Like the first time I picked up, I can say picked up, was given to me, the Corpus Hermetica. Like, I didn't go to work the next day. I was up all night reading that. Yeah, and it's a difficult read, but it was doing something to me. Like, it was probably the first time I'd had like an extra woo experience that was not drug infused, and I wasn't a woo guy then, but I knew that book. Like, I fucking knew it. I didn't know how I knew it, but I was consumed, and I just had to read it. And another one is Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Like, to even think that I can go to a bookshop and get that book and read it, that it was never supposed to be that type of book. It was essentially his personal, personal writings. And then, Galen, his head physician, which Amon Hillman, bless the man, comes out reading Galen's work, that Marcus Aurelius was fucking on enough opium to kill a fucking elephant. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, that makes so much sense to me. How reading Meditations again, going, oh mate, Marcus Aurelius was writing this when he was fucking off his head. Now it makes sense to me, like, where he's pulling that from, and no doubt he would have drank the purple and those components. For me as a dude, it's a fascinating story. I'm reading that, not just that book, but there's another story that's laid behind it. There's an appreciation of like, wow, and how many other men have, whether that be by candlelight or anything across the world, that have been on a pursuit for knowledge. And I suppose that's what motivates me at times in relation to that. And I suppose with the sisters, and there's other elements for you guys as well that I suppose would be the best way. And it's definitely not fucking EQ, but the way you work with your hands. And I used to suppose I got to see it with my nan, both my nans, knitting. I can recall now is I'd sit there and look at my nan, and my nan would be knitting, just knitting a jumper or some shit. I've still got a scarf from my nan that I don't wear much, but she made it for me. But knitting, and I look back now, and I'm like, that was her form of meditation. That was her form of medicine. The same as Italian mummies in the kitchen, cooking up. There's so much that is on offer if we decide to play a bigger game, and that there is the choice point. So I'm going to wrap up. It's an hour. I hope you have enjoyed this communication this evening and had a bit of a chuckle. I will be doing a few more that will be a lot more structured. And for the lads, you will see it over the next couple of days. An invitation we put out to you guys for Men of Knowledge that will kick off in January. And also I will be running a mastermind next year. That's going to be an intensive. And I suppose the part that I can say with all of the fibers within me is a main reason why I've been, let's say, semi-quiet for a considerable amount of time, and that there is obviously many cycles coming to a close, and a new day is dawning, but in a new domain of knowing. Well, I can't just sit there and be a talking head without going through the alchemy of a whole range of different components. I have a very broad skill set, and everything I have done for the last 10 years is essentially for, well, more than 10 years now, is essentially for this time. And if there is enough interest, wouldn't say it's a course that I wrote, but I've had sitting there for quite some time, and I was having a look at it today and go, yeah, that'd be good. It will be called Exalted. It will be for men and women. I will be screening for that. I might just put that out in a few days to see if there's any bites or whatnot. Like with that, all the folks in Portal, you can have a play in that. But yeah, it's essentially Game Time Legends, and pick who you have on your team that are going to be very real with you, and choose reality, no matter how hard it may hurt at first. Because within that, you will be able to see the programs, beliefs, and perceptions of the stories that we have told themselves break. That there is where the opportunity is. The future is a reanimation of the past, and in a now moment, you get to choose. Belief is the driver of action. Choice is a great motivator, but it is your heart and your mind that will keep the momentum. Spend your give a fuck bucks wisely. You're not here to fuck spiders. Your boat's out in the bay. It's a minute to midnight. See who's around and celebrate. And I don't mean as in celebrate as in having a party, but just an acknowledgement of, yeah, I see you, I recognize you, and I acknowledge you in the choices that you are making. That is all, legends, and I will catch you soon. Big game, yeah? Play to win. Ciao.